Why was everyone staring at her like she didn't belong there anymore? Lieutenant Sarah Martinez tried to focus on the sound of her crutches instead, the steady, metallic click that echoed through the gleaming lobby of the Naval Special Warfare Command building. Each step was a small battle between balance and dignity. She'd spent weeks dreading this moment, her first day back on base since the accident. A car crash. That's all it took to shatter 2 years of relentless training, months of pain, and a dream she'd chased since she first pinned on her Navy insignia, to become the first woman to ever earn the SEAL Trident. But that dream had died in twisted steel and broken glass. Now all she wanted was to get through the day unnoticed. The lobby was alive with motion, officers rushing between briefings, sailors in formation, the sharp scent of coffee mingling with disinfectant and oil. Everyone looked busy. Everyone looked whole. She kept her head down, her uniform perfectly pressed, hoping no one would recognize the woman who once ran 5 miles before sunrise and swam a mile before breakfast. Then she heard them. Combat boots, synchronized, rhythmic, confident. 8 of them. They turned the corner like a wave of confidence in human form, 8 Navy SEALs, fresh from their morning PT. Their uniforms were still damp with sweat, their laughter loud, unguarded. But the moment they saw her, saw the crutches, the limp, the struggle, their noise died. The silence hit like a gust of cold wind. Sarah's fingers tightened around the rubber grips. She reached for the heavy glass door ahead of her, balancing awkwardly on one leg, trying not to show the tremor in her arms. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then a voice, deep, amused, careless. "Well, well, look what the tide dragged in." The speaker was a burly petty officer with forearms like steel cables and a grin sharp enough to cut glass. Rick Thompson. She remembered his name, remembered seeing him once at the training range, all swagger and no patience. "Looks like someone's having trouble keeping up," he said, the mockery dripping in every word. His teammates shifted, some smirking, others looking away. Sarah said nothing. She tried to swipe her ID card with steady hands, but her fingers trembled. The scanner beeped red, error. Before she could try again, an older security guard leaned over and helped her. His voice was soft, kind. "Take your time, Lieutenant." "Thank you," she murmured. But Thompson wasn't done. He turned to his teammates, chuckling. "Remember when she talked about joining our ranks? Guess those dreams are walking away on crutches now." The words hit her like shrapnel. She could feel the heat rise to her cheeks, shame, fury, disbelief. She had trained for this life, fought for it, bled for it. And now the only thing she could fight was the urge not to cry in front of them. Another voice joined in, Seaman Rodriguez, his tone fake sympathetic. "Such a shame. All that training, all those runs before dawn. And now," he gave a mock sigh, "guess you'll be training paperwork instead of warriors." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was sharp, sharp enough to cut through whatever pride she'd managed to hold onto. The guard shot them a glare but said nothing. "Elevator's right behind you, ma'am," he said quietly. She nodded, head held high, refusing to limp faster even though every second near them felt like an eternity. She pressed the button and waited. Behind her, the voices carried on. "Maybe the Navy needs a new division," Thompson joked. "The mobility unit. Call M the Navy limps." The laughter swelled. And in that moment, Sarah understood something she'd never quite faced before, that sometimes the battlefield wasn't overseas. Sometimes it was right here in the hallways of your own command. The elevator chimed. She stepped inside. As the doors began to close, she caught sight of Thompson, pretending to limp, leaning on an invisible crutch while his friends laughed like hyenas. Her jaw clenched. Something cracked deep inside her, a soundless fracture that no X-ray could find. The door sealed shut, cutting off the noise. For a long moment she just stood there, shoulders trembling, her reflection staring back from the polished steel. A tear slipped down her cheek, just one before she wiped it away with the back of her sleeve. She survived mortar fire in Afghanistan. She survived interrogation rooms filled with men who would have killed her without hesitation. But somehow, their laughter, her own brothers in arms, hurt more than any bullet. The elevator rose, smooth and silent. Through the glass wall she could see the training grounds outside, the obstacle course she once conquered daily. Rope climbs, wall jumps, balance beams. Every challenge she once crushed now seemed to mock her from a distance. That life felt far away now. When the elevator stopped, she straightened her uniform, took a steadying breath, and stepped into the intelligence wing, her new assignment until medical retirement. Each click of her crutch echoed in the sterile corridor. Every sound reminded her of what she'd lost, but also of what she refused to surrender. Sarah reached her small office and tried to lose herself in the stack of classified files waiting on her desk. Data was her refuge: reports, translations, intercepted communications. The work didn't care if she limped. It just asked for focus, discipline, precision, all things she still had. She opened a report from the Kandahar network, the one she'd helped dismantle 2 years ago. The memories came flooding back: the tents, the desert air, the chaos of intercepted signals. She'd saved lives back then, real ones. But even as she typed, the echo of Thompson's laughter lingered like static. 3 floors below, that same laughter was still alive. Thompson leaned against a locker, recounting his performance in the lobby to whoever would listen. "You should have seen her face," he said, grinning. "Like a deer in headlights. Poor thing probably wants a parking spot with her name on it now." Rodriguez looked uneasy. "Maybe we went too far, Rick." Thompson snorted. "This isn't a daycare. She can't keep up, she's out. Simple as that." Before anyone could answer, the door slammed open. Senior Chief Marcus Williams stepped in, 15 years of service written in the lines of his face, a voice carved from steel and sand. "Gear up, gentlemen. Briefing in 20 minutes. Full dress uniforms. We've got high-level visitors." The tone left no room for questions. The room fell silent as Williams continued, his voice low and commanding. "And one more thing. I don't want to hear about any incidents or unprofessional conduct today. We represent the best of the best. Act like it." Thompson's grin faded. The word incident stuck to his mind like a burr. As the men filed out, Williams' eyes lingered on him for half a second longer than necessary, long enough to make him wonder just how much the senior chief knew. Meanwhile, in the intelligence wing, Sarah's supervisor approached. Commander Patricia Hayes, a calm presence in a storm of uniforms and egos, stopped by her desk. "Lieutenant Martinez, you're needed downstairs in 20 minutes. Conference room Alpha." Sarah blinked. "Ma'am, that's a high-level briefing. Are you sure?" Hayes' eyes softened. "I'm sure. They need your expertise on the Kandahar network analysis. You're our top intelligence officer for that region." Sarah hesitated, glancing at her crutches. "Ma'am, I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable." "Sarah," Hayes interrupted gently, "your mind is your greatest weapon, not your legs. The visitor personally requested our best. That's you." Her words landed like a lifeline. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in front of the mirror of a deserted hallway, adjusting her uniform. Every ribbon straight, every line crisp. She would walk into that room with dignity, even if she had to balance on steel to do it. When she reached the conference room, the air changed. The same SEALs from the morning were already there, their uniforms spotless, faces unreadable. For a moment, nobody spoke. Thompson's eyes widened when he saw her, the woman he'd mocked now walking toward the same door he stood beside. "What's she doing here?" he whispered to Rodriguez. Rodriguez just shook his head. "Maybe intel support." Sarah ignored them, moving past with the quiet confidence of someone who refused to bow twice in one day. The conference room was vast and bright. At the head of the table sat a man whose presence seemed to change the temperature of the room, tall, silver-haired, and wearing more stars on his uniform than most men would ever see in a lifetime. But it wasn't the stars that caught her attention. It was the pair of crutches leaning neatly against the wall behind him. The man rose as she entered. His movements were slow, deliberate, a faint limp in his step. "Lieutenant Martinez," he said warmly, his voice deep and steady. "I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your work on the Kandahar intercepts was extraordinary." Sarah froze for a moment, caught between shock and pride. She managed to stand straighter, balancing on her own crutches. "Thank you, sir. I'm honored." The SEALs entered behind her, their confidence visibly fatting when they recognized the insignia on the man's shoulder. Senior Chief Williams called out sharply, "Attention on deck." Every man in the room stood rigid. The Admiral nodded, waving them to ease. "At ease, gentlemen, please take your seats." As they sat, Sarah noticed it again, the Admiral's careful movements, the subtle drag of his left leg. She wondered silently, what had he been through? The Admiral opened a folder, his gaze sweeping across the room, calm, assessing, knowing. But before he began, he said something that made every heart stop for a moment. "Before we discuss today's briefing," his voice low but razor-sharp, "I need to address an incident that occurred in this building this morning, involving unprofessional conduct directed at one of our officers." A stillness fell across the room. Thompson's chest tightened. His pulse began to hammer in his throat. The Admiral continued, "I have learned many things in my 35 years of service, but the most important is this: true strength is not measured by physical perfection, but by character, by resilience, by the courage to continue serving when everything else is taken from you." He took a slow step forward, the faint sound of a prosthetic joint clicking against the floor. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The SEAL stared, silent now. The weight of his limp seemed to echo louder than any voice in that room. And though no one yet knew what he would reveal next, something was about to change forever. She could hear the hum of the air vents above her, the sound somehow louder than the men's breathing. The air in the conference room felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Admiral James Harrison stood at the head of the table, the light glinting off the 3 silver stars on his shoulder boards. His presence filled the space without needing volume or motion. He didn't pace. He didn't bark. He simply looked at them, one by one, until even the toughest SEALs shifted in their seats. "Lieutenant Martinez," he said softly, turning his gaze toward her, "you've done outstanding work for this command. Your reports on the Kandahar network saved American lives." Sarah felt her throat tighten. After what had happened that morning, hearing those words from a man like him felt almost unreal. She straightened in her chair, but her pulse was racing. Then the Admiral's tone changed, firm, deliberate. "I've also been informed," he continued, "that earlier today, in this very building, one of our officers was subjected to behavior unbecoming of the uniform, cruelty masquerading as humor." No one breathed. He began walking, slow, deliberate steps, the faint click of his prosthetic against the tile breaking the silence. "Let me make something perfectly clear," he said, his voice low but resonant. "I have no patience for those who confuse strength with arrogance, or who believe the measure of a warrior lies only in muscle and motion." The room remained frozen. Sarah could feel Thompson's discomfort beside her like static electricity. Admiral Harrison stopped beside her chair. "Lieutenant Martinez, I've read your entire service record. I know what you've endured. I know what you've given to this country." Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. She managed a small nod, every muscle in her face trembling to keep composure. Then he turned his gaze toward Thompson. "Petty officer," the Admiral said, his voice still calm, too calm, "you're one of our SEALs, correct?" "Yes, sir," Thompson croaked. "Then you must know what defines a SEAL." Physical fitness, mental toughness, and the ability to complete any mission, sir," Thompson replied automatically. The Admiral gave a faint nod, a textbook answer. He took another step closer, but incomplete. He leaned on the table, his voice lowering until every man had to strain to hear. "Courage, adaptability, loyalty, these are the traits that carry a man when his body fails him. These are what make a warrior." He straightened, his face hardening. "What happens," he asked quietly, "when the mission doesn't end with a clean victory? When you lose something, a limb, a friend, a future? Do you stop serving your country then?" Thompson swallowed, unable to speak. The Admiral didn't wait for an answer. With slow, deliberate precision, he reached down and rolled up the left leg of his uniform trousers. A gasp rippled through the room. Below the neatly pressed fabric was a prosthetic limb, advanced, sleek, and unmistakably real. The metal joints caught the fluorescent light, gleaming with quiet power. "I lost this leg 12 years ago in Iraq," the Admiral said, his tone even, almost conversational. "An IED tore through our vehicle. 2 of my men were killed instantly. I woke up in a field hospital with nothing but pain and questions." He paused, his gaze distant for a heartbeat, not for sympathy but memory. "Doctors told me my career was over. Colleagues told me to retire, to move on, to accept my new limitations." His eyes found Thompson again. "Instead, I learned to walk, to command, and to lead again. I led 3 more operations, commanded a strike group, and eventually took this post. I didn't do it because I'm special. I did it because giving up was never an option." The silence was unbearable. The SEALs who had mocked Sarah that morning now sat motionless, their eyes on the table, faces pale. The Admiral lowered his pant leg, the quiet rustle of the fabric loud in the still air. "So, petty officer," he continued softly, "you tell me, do you think that losing a limb or using a crutch makes someone less of a warrior?" "No, sir," Thompson whispered. "I didn't think so." The Admiral's gaze swept the room once more. "The Navy's strength isn't in perfect bodies or flawless records. It's in those who keep showing up despite the pain, despite the loss." He turned back toward Sarah. "Lieutenant Martinez embodies that." Sarah could feel every eye in the room shift to her, but she didn't lower her head this time. She sat upright, the crutches leaning beside her chair like silent sentinels. "Sir," she began, her voice low but steady, "thank you." The Admiral nodded, then looked toward his folder on the table. "I think it's time we remind this room exactly who Lieutenant Martinez is." He opened the file and began reading, his tone shifting back to official cadence. "To tour in Afghanistan. Intelligence officer, Special Operations Task Force. In her first deployment, she volunteered to accompany a SEAL team on a high-risk mission in Kandahar province. The mission came under heavy enemy fire. Lieutenant Martinez continued to transmit real-time intelligence while administering combat aid to 2 wounded operators." The Admiral glanced up. Those men lived because of her. Thompson's hands were clasped together, so tightly his knuckles were white. "For those actions," the Admiral continued, "Lieutenant Martinez received the Bronze Star with Valor device, one of only 12 women in Navy history to earn that decoration." No one spoke. Sarah sat frozen, feeling exposed but also, for the first time since the accident scene. The Admiral turned another page. During her second deployment, she uncovered a terrorist communication network planning coordinated attacks on multiple U.S. installations. Her analysis prevented what could have been the single deadliest day for our forces in that region. She was awarded the Meritorious Service Medal. He closed the file slowly. "And 6 months ago, she nearly died in a car crash caused by a drunk driver. 7 surgeries, 3 weeks in a coma. Doctors told her she'd never walk again. But here she is back on active duty by choice." He placed his hands on the table and leaned forward, the authority in his tone returning full force. That, gentlemen, is what real courage looks like. That is what it means to serve. Sarah's breath trembled, but she didn't look away. The Admiral's voice softened. Every one of you will face your own test someday. Maybe not today, maybe not in combat, but it will come. And when it does, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that the people you underestimate might be the ones who save your life. He turned to Senior Chief Williams. Chief, I believe you asked earlier about future assignments for Lieutenant Martinez. Yes, sir, Williams replied, his tone respectful, almost reverent now. Good, the Admiral said, straightening fully, because that's the reason I called this meeting. He looked toward Sarah again. The Navy is establishing a new Joint Intelligence and Special Operations Unit, a hybrid cell designed to analyze enemy communications and feed real-time intelligence directly to field teams. It will require leadership, someone who understands both worlds. Sarah's heart began to race. I want you, Lieutenant Martinez, he said clearly, to serve as the deputy director of this unit. The words struck like a thunderclap. The room remained still, 8 men frozen in disbelief, while Sarah sat stunned, her mind struggling to process what she just heard. Sir, she whispered, I don't know what to say. Say yes, the Admiral replied, a faint smile touching his lips, because you've already earned it. Tears blurred her vision before she could stop them. Yes, sir, I would be honored. The Admiral gave a small nod. Then it's settled. You'll begin immediately. Senior Chief Williams, your team will be the first to work under this new initiative. You'll coordinate directly with Lieutenant Martinez for intelligence operations. Williams nodded sharply. Understood, sir. The Admiral's gaze returned to Thompson. Petty officer, he said, voice measured but heavy. I trust you'll have no issue working under Lieutenant Martinez's direction. Thompson's throat felt dry as sand. No, sir, no issue at all. Good. The Admiral gathered his papers, his prosthetic clicking faintly as he moved. Let this morning be a reminder, he said, looking at each man in turn. In this command, respect is not optional. Strength without humility is weakness. He paused, then added quietly, and sometimes the people you mock are the ones carrying you when you fall. With that, he turned toward the door. As he left, the silence remained, not awkward now, but reverent. A heavy, thoughtful quiet that seemed to stretch across the room like a curtain. Sarah sat there, hands folded in her lap, staring at the place where the Admiral had stood. The shame she'd felt that morning was gone, replaced by something steadier, stronger. The SEALs were still seated, but none could meet her gaze. For the first time all day, she didn't feel broken. She felt unbreakable. And as the hum of the air vents returned, Sarah realized something profound. Sometimes, dignity doesn't shout. It simply stands quietly until the world learns to listen. The room emptied one by one, but Sarah stayed still. The air still carried the echo of Admiral Harrison's words, words that felt like a quiet storm washing away months of shame. Outside the glass wall, the late afternoon sunlight bled through the blinds, stripping the conference table in bars of gold. The SEALs who had once laughed at her were gone now, walking out in silence that wasn't discomfort anymore, it was reflection. A silence born from guilt, from understanding. She didn't feel satisfaction, not even victory, just a strange stillness, the kind that comes when something inside finally stops breaking. Her thoughts drifted back to the accident. The sound of metal tearing, the smell of gasoline, the weightless moment when the car spun and then nothing. Waking up to a ceiling she didn't recognize. A doctor's voice saying the words that gutted her, "You may never walk again." She had wanted to scream, to punch the walls. Instead, she stared at her own reflection in the hospital window and asked a quieter question, who am I now? The answer had taken months to find. And today, it had walked into that conference room wearing 3 silver stars. The door opened softly behind her. He was right about you, came a voice. Sarah turned. Commander Hayes stood there, her uniform crisp, her expression warm. "Ma'am," Sarah said, straightening as best she could. Hayes smiled faintly. "Sit, Lieutenant, you've had a day." Sarah exhaled. "That's one way to put it." Hayes crossed the room and placed a folder on the table. "Admiral Harrison briefed me on your new role. You'll start tomorrow at 800. Secure Facility 3. He's giving you full operational authority over 6 analysts." "6 analysts," Sarah blinked. That's a team." "That's your team," Hayes corrected. "And it's more than that, it's a statement. He wants every unit on this base to understand that resilience has a chain of command too." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Ma'am, I don't know if I'm ready for this." Hayes sat across from her. "No one ever is, not when it matters." Her tone softened. "But I've seen your work, Sarah. You don't just process intelligence, you see patterns that others miss. The SEALs will come to trust you. Maybe not instantly, but they will." Sarah nodded, though uncertainty lingered. "And Petty Officer Thompson?" Hayes' smile faded slightly. "He'll learn, one way or another." They sat in silence for a moment before Hayes rose. "Get some rest. Tomorrow begins a new kind of mission." When she left, Sarah lingered a few seconds longer, staring at the crutches leaning against her chair. They weren't symbols of weakness anymore. They were reminders of the weight she'd carried and survived. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Her small apartment near the base was dark except for the amber light from a desk lamp. The walls were lined with framed commendations and photographs, teammates in desert fatigues, the Kandahar forward outpost, and one picture that hurt to look at. Her running the obstacle course, grinning, dirt-streaked and alive. She stared at it for a long time. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Tomorrow's briefing 800. Bring your experience, not your excuses. Harrison." A small smile tugged at her lips. It wasn't a motivational quote. It was better. It was faith. She closed her eyes and whispered into the quiet, "Yes, sir." The next morning, the base was drenched in early sunlight when Sarah arrived at Secure Facility 3. The guard at the gate recognized her immediately. This time, his salute came without hesitation. Inside, the hum of computers and distant voices filled the air. The operations floor was alive, 6 analysts, all focused, all young, all waiting. The large digital display at the front wall showed live satellite feeds across 3 continents, flickering data streams from encrypted communications, and color-coded alerts pulsing like a heartbeat. "Lieutenant Martinez," a voice greeted. A petite woman in her mid-20s approached, saluting sharply. "Petty Officer Second Class Jennifer Park, Communications Analysis." Sarah returned the salute. "At ease, Park. I'm not big on ceremony when there's work to do." Park smiled slightly. "Good, because we've got plenty." The rest of the team gathered, an even mix of men and women, all specialists in their fields. Sarah studied them for a moment, the nerves in their faces, the curiosity. They knew her story. Everyone did by now. "Morning," Sarah began, her tone firm but steady. "I'm Lieutenant Martinez, your new deputy director. Admiral Harrison established this unit to bridge intelligence and operations. Our job isn't to theorize, it's to save lives in real time." The room was silent, attentive. "We'll be monitoring SEAL teams during deployment," she continued. "Every signal, every whisper, every bit of chatter, we find meaning before it finds us. We make sure they come home." Park nodded, jotting notes. Sarah glanced at the large screen behind them, streams of intercepted data scrolling like endless rain. "Our first mission assignment is Operation Neptune's Arrow, active in 2 weeks. Senior Chief Marcus Williams' team will be our field unit." The room stirred slightly. Everyone had heard of Williams' team, the same SEAL unit that had mocked her weeks ago. Sarah felt the tension but ignored it. "I don't care what anyone out there thinks of me," she said quietly. But in here, I expect precision, integrity, and zero excuses. We don't get second chances. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," came the chorus. "Good," she said. "Then let's begin." For the next 3 days, Sarah buried herself in preparation, reviewing satellite data, intercept patterns, and enemy communication routes. The rhythm of work came back to her easily, methodical, consuming, grounding. Late one evening, while reviewing a string of intercepted messages, she noticed something, a frequency shift buried under static. Faint, almost intentional. "Park," she called softly. "Run a harmonic scan on this band. Looks like encrypted burst transmission." Park leaned over her shoulder. "It's bouncing between repeaters. Someone's hiding a signal." Sarah's mind raced. "Or testing one." She marked the coordinates. "Cross-reference this with Kandahar network signatures. I want to know who's whispering out there." As the data compiled, the memory of Harrison's words lingered. "Use what they see as weakness to your advantage." He was right. Every long night in that hospital bed had taught her patience, the ability to see what others overlooked. Pain had sharpened her focus. By the end of the week, her team had uncovered something significant, a potential communication link between known insurgents in Syria and a suspected sleeper cell near Djibouti. The operation briefing was scheduled for the next morning. Sarah reviewed her notes late into the night, eyes burning, Crutches leaning against her desk like faithful sentries. Outside, the hum of generators filled the air. At 700, she was already at the command table when Senior Chief Williams and his men walked in. They paused in the doorway, the same men from the lobby weeks ago. Their posture was straight, respectful, but their eyes said it all, awkward guilt wrapped in quiet respect. "Morning, Lieutenant," Williams greeted. "We're ready for the intel rundown." Sarah nodded. "Good morning, Chief. Let's get to work." The next hour unfolded like a controlled storm. She briefed them with precision, maps, signal patterns, predictive movements. Her voice was clear, her analysis sharper than any blade. By the time she finished, even Thompson, who had barely met her eyes, was leaning forward, taking notes, his expression grave. "Any questions?" she asked. Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Just one, ma'am. What's your confidence level on these intercepts?" 90%, she said simply. 10% margin for chaos. The enemy's good, but we're better." A brief smile tugged at Williams' mouth. "I like the way you think, Lieutenant." Sarah allowed herself a small nod. "Then let's bring them home safe." That night, as the facility lights dimmed, Sarah lingered alone by the observation window. Below, she could see the SEAL training grounds, silhouettes moving in rhythm, preparing for the next mission. She watched Thompson among them, silent and focused. Maybe people could change. Maybe shame, if faced honestly, could forge something new. The base lights glimmered like constellations against the dark ocean beyond. She felt something rise in her chest, not pride, not relief, but peace. For the first time since the accident, she didn't feel like she was trying to return to who she used to be. She was becoming someone new, someone stronger. And though the world hadn't stopped doubting her yet, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would never doubt herself again. The night before the operation, the base felt different, quieter, heavier, as if even the walls knew something big was coming. Sarah sat alone in the operations center, lit only by the cold glow of her monitors. Dozens of screens scrolled with encrypted chatter, satellite relays, and infrared maps, each one representing threads in a web that stretched across oceans. Outside, rain whispered against the glass. The storm wasn't supposed to hit for another day, but it had arrived early, a fitting omen. Her fingers tapped lightly on the keyboard, zooming in on a heat signature near the target zone in northern Djibouti. 3 trucks, too small for supply convoys, too coordinated for random movement. Her instincts, honed from years of pattern analysis, whispered the same message again and again. Something about to happen. Behind her, the door opened, burning the midnight oil again. Admiral Harrison stepped in quietly, his uniform immaculate as always. The rhythmic tap of his prosthetic was faint beneath the sound of the rain. Sarah stood quickly. "Sir, didn't expect you tonight." He waved her back down. "I couldn't sleep. I never could before an operation." He studied the screens. "Neptune's Arrow, first joint mission under your command." "Yes, sir. The SEALs deploy at 400. He nodded. "And you'll be their eyes." Sarah glanced at the live feed of the SEAL base in Bahrain, Williams' team in final prep, checking weapons, syncing comms, their movements calm but purposeful. Thompson was there too, quieter than the others. Focused. Changed. The Admiral followed her gaze. "He's learned something these last few weeks. You might have taught him more than any mission could." Sarah smiled faintly. "I wasn't trying to teach him anything, sir. Just trying to survive the day." Harrison's expression softened. "That's what most good leaders do, Lieutenant. They survive the day and make others stronger for it." He stepped closer to the console, scanning the satellite feeds. "How's the data looking?" "Unstable," she admitted. "We're tracking 3 possible routes, but the signals are fragmented. If we guess wrong, we'll miss them." "Then don't guess," Harrison said calmly. "Trust your instincts. They've saved lives before." Sarah hesitated. "Sir, what if I fail?" He looked at her, his eyes steady, voice low. "You won't, but if you do, you fail forward, you adapt. That's what warriors do." He turned toward the door, his limp more pronounced tonight. "Get some rest, Martinez. You'll need your strength. Tomorrow the world will be watching." When he left, the room felt larger and quieter. Sarah stared at her reflection in the dark monitor, the faint outline of her crutches beside her desk. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we do this right." At 400, the base came alive. Engines roared on the flight line, the storm now a drizzle under the first hint of dawn. The SEAL team loaded gear into their transport, black wetsuits under tan uniforms, eyes hidden behind night vision goggles. Sarah's voice came through their comms, calm and focused. "Neptune 1, this is Control, confirming uplink." "Copy, Control," Williams replied. "Comms are green." Sarah glanced at her analysts. "Initiate live monitoring. I want every feed running double redundancy." Screens lit up across the room, live drone footage, satellite overlays, encrypted voice logs. Park adjusted her headset. "Ma'am, we've got multiple transmissions from the coastal village. Unknown code structure." Sarah leaned in. "Decode priority. We need their timeline." Minutes later, a pattern emerged, a series of short, frantic bursts. Park's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Got it. Translation coming through now." Sarah read the decoded line aloud, her voice tightening. "They're moving early. Hostile units are already on the road." She switched channels. "Neptune 1, enemy convoy is mobile, 3 trucks, 15 tangos heading south on route Charlie. Adjust intercept vector." "Copy that," Williams responded immediately. "We're moving." The mission had begun. The next 3 hours unfolded like a breath held too long. Sarah's world shrank to the glowing map, the blinking icons, the hum of her headset. Every minute she tracked movement, issued updates, and rerouted the SEALs through terrain she'd memorized like her own heartbeat. But something felt wrong. "Ma'am," Park said suddenly, "I'm picking up chatter from a secondary source, encrypted, tight band. Not part of the main network." Sarah frowned. "Play it." Static, then a single phrase in Pashto. "They know we're coming." Her stomach sank. "Neptune 1, this is Control," she said quickly. "You've been compromised. Break radio silence and shift to vector echo immediately." Williams' voice came back, calm but tense. "Control, we can't. We're pinned in the ravine, hostiles on both ridgelines." Sarah's mind raced. Her analysts were already cross-referencing satellite feeds, searching for any exit point. None. Control, another voice came over the channel. Thompson. His breathing was ragged. We've got wounded. We're low on cover, need immediate options. Sarah's pulse quickened, but her tone stayed steady. Copy Neptune 2, stay online. Her hands flew across the keyboard. Park, show me the terrain grid, overlay elevation maps. The topography flashed on screen. There, a dry riverbed cutting beneath the ridge, half a mile east. Neptune 1 control. You have an extraction path east 45 degrees. Riverbed access. Go now, smoke cover and suppressive fire. Williams didn't hesitate. Copy control, moving. Seconds dragged like hours. Gunfire crackled faintly through the comms, distant but real. Then silence. Neptune 1 status. Static. Sarah's heart stopped. Then Williams' voice cut through, strained but alive. Control, we're clear. Repeat, we're clear. Moving to exfil point. 2 minor wounds, no fatalities. The entire operations center erupted in quiet relief. Sarah closed her eyes, exhaling slowly as tension drained from her shoulders. Park grinned at her. Ma'am, you just saved an entire SEAL team. Sarah shook her head softly. No, we did. But deep inside, a small part of her allowed the warmth of pride to bloom. For the first time since the accident, she felt whole again, not fixed, not healed, but whole. An hour later, the SEALs were airborne, heading home. Sarah sat back in her chair, exhaustion washing over her. Her crutches leaned against the console, untouched for hours. She hadn't needed them here. Here, she stood on a different kind of strength. Her headset buzzed again. Control, this is Neptune 1. It was Williams. Go ahead, Chief. Wanted you to know, your call saved us. You read that field like you were standing right beside us. Sarah smiled faintly. Just doing my job, Chief. There was a pause. Maybe, but that job just made believers out of my men, Thompson included. When the transmission ended, Sarah sat in silence, watching the live feed of the helicopter crossing the dawn horizon. Somewhere behind her, the door opened quietly. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Admiral Harrison stood at the entrance, arms folded, watching the monitors. I heard, he said simply. She smiled tiredly. We got them out, sir. He nodded. So I see. His eyes softened. And how does it feel? Sarah leaned back, glancing at the crutches beside her desk. Feels like I finally stopped falling. The Admiral studied her for a moment, then said quietly, there will be more missions, more storms. But today you reminded everyone here what service really means. He paused at the doorway. Get some rest, Lieutenant, you've earned it. As he left, Sarah turned back to the monitors. The helicopter had vanished beyond the clouds, leaving only an empty radar field and the slow pulse of her own reflection in the screen. She whispered to herself, voice steady now, almost reverent. Sometimes strength isn't loud, it's quiet, precise, and it saves lives. Outside, the rain had stopped. The first light of morning broke across the base, golden, calm, and full of promise. The sun rose over the Naval Special Warfare Command, painting the ocean in gold and copper. But inside the intelligence facility, the light felt dimmer, colder somehow. It had been 3 days since Operation Neptune's Arrow. The mission had ended successfully, but Sarah knew too well that victories in the field didn't always mean peace at headquarters. She sat in her office, surrounded by silence and data, the same twin comforts that had always steadied her. The after-action reports lay open before her, the details clear and concise. Mission success, 0 casualties, all objectives met. On paper, it was perfect. But not everyone saw perfection the same way. The door opened without warning. Commander Hayes stepped in, her face unreadable. Lieutenant, Admiral Harrison wants to see you in his office. Now. Sarah blinked. Ma'am, is something wrong? Hayes hesitated for half a second too long. Just go and be ready for questions. The words hit like a slow chill, spreading through her chest. She stood, adjusted her uniform, and made her way toward the command corridor. The hallways were unusually quiet, no laughter, no chatter. Just the echo of her crutches against the floor, steady and sharp. When she reached the Admiral's office, the door was already open. Harrison stood behind his desk, his expression thoughtful. Beside him sat a man she didn't recognize, uniform crisp, posture rigid, face lined with authority. "Lieutenant Martinez," Harrison said, gesturing for her to sit. "This is Rear Admiral Kent Wallace from Fleet Command." Sarah saluted and took her seat. The other admiral's gaze was cool, almost clinical. "I've reviewed your operation logs," Wallace began, his voice cutting. "Excellent results, but there's an issue." Sarah's chest tightened. "Sir." "Your call to redirect the SEALs mid-mission," Wallace said, tapping the file in front of him. "You acted without waiting for final command authorization." Sarah frowned. "With respect, sir, there wasn't time. The team was pinned down. If I hadn't acted, they would've." He raised a hand. "I'm not questioning your intent, Lieutenant. I'm questioning your protocol." Harrison shifted slightly. "Kent," he said evenly, "she made a judgment call under fire, the right one." Wallace's tone stayed calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Judgment calls are fine until one goes wrong. The brass are nervous, James. You've placed an injured intelligence officer in charge of real-time operations. Not everyone is thrilled about that decision." The words landed like a blow, not just because of the meaning, but because of how casually they were said. Sarah sat still, her pulse steady but fierce. "With respect, sir, my leg doesn't affect my mind." Wallace's eyes flickered, assessing her. "I'm not doubting your intelligence, Lieutenant, but you must understand optics matter. Command wants to know this isn't some kind of experiment." Harrison's voice hardened. "It's not an experiment, it's leadership, and she's proven it." The two men stared at each other, the air thick with unspoken challenge. Finally, Wallace exhaled and leaned back. "Fine, then prove it again. Another mission coming down the line, higher stakes. You'll oversee it. If it goes well, we'll have nothing left to discuss." He stood collecting his hat. "But if it does," he let the sentence hang unfinished before walking out. The door shut softly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Sarah looked at Harrison. "He's right about one thing," she said quietly. "I still have something to prove." Harrison studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Then prove it, but not for them, Sarah, for yourself." Later that day, the news broke. Operation Silent Rain, an urgent deployment to intercept a high-value target in Yemen. A weapons smuggler linked to multiple attacks on U.S. interests. The mission was to unfold in 48 hours. And once again, Sarah's team would provide the intelligence backbone. The chatter in the corridors grew louder as the briefing neared. Some praised her, others whispered doubts. She could hear them, the murmured questions, the thinly veiled skepticism. Can she handle the pressure again? What if it was luck? She ignored it all. That evening she gathered her analysts. "We're not chasing ghosts this time," she said, her voice firm. "We're going after the source. I want eyes on every transmission, every satellite feed, every suspicious signal in this region." Park raised her hand. "Ma'am, this HVT, he's former Special Forces trained. He knows how to hide. We may not get a clean signature." "Then we'll make one," Sarah replied. "Set a trap with false intel, feed him coordinates we control, make him come to us." The analysts exchanged quick, excited glances. This was where Sarah thrived, in the invisible battlefield of minds and signals. Her world wasn't about bullets and blood. It was about deception and patience. And tonight, it was about redemption. 2 days later, the mission went live. Sarah stood at the center of the operations room, her team surrounding her, monitors flickering with live feeds. The SEALs were already in the air, their helicopters slicing through the desert night. "Neptune 1, this is Control," Sarah said into the headset. We've intercepted chatter confirming your target's movement. Estimated window 30 minutes. William's voice came through. Copy control, we're moving. Everything felt precise, measured until it didn't. Ma'am, Park said suddenly, her tone uneasy. Satellite feed just glitched. Sector Delta went dark. Sarah's head snapped up. Define dark. No thermal, no radio, no GPS. It's like someone cut the grid. Sarah's pulse quickened. EMP interference. Negative, too localized. Then came William's voice, crackling with static. Control, we're blind out here. GPS just dropped. Confirm coordinates. Sarah's mind raced. She pulled up the backup maps, old analog renderings from before the digital overhaul. She scanned them, tracing terrain contours from memory. Neptune 1, she said quickly. You're off course, shift bearing 350. There's a canyon wall 2 clicks north. Use it for cover. Copy control. Seconds later, the map flickered again, and this time, enemy signals bloomed like wildfire across the screen. They're baiting us, Sarah whispered. They knew we were coming. Her analysts looked at her, wide-eyed. Park whispered, they've jammed us, ma'am, we're cut off. Sarah stared at the blinking red dots on the monitor, her breath shallow. The enemy had anticipated them, mirrored their tactics, their frequency hopping, even their trap. Her own plan had been turned against her. Ma'am, Park said urgently, we're losing contact with the team. Sarah's throat tightened. The sound of static filled her headset, cold and merciless. For the first time since her accident, she felt the same helplessness, the same crushing silence she'd fought so hard to escape. Not again. She grabbed the backup console, rerouting power manually, forcing the encryption link to reset. Sweat beaded at her temple as the code lines rolled across the display. Come on, she muttered, come on. The lights flickered, then a faint signal broke through. Control, this is Neptune 1, William's voice roared back into the channel, loud and alive. We're still in the fight. Your last vector saved our asses. Hostiles neutralized. Repeat, target secured. Sarah closed her eyes, relief flooding through her. Around her, her analysts cheered quietly. Copy that, Neptune 1, she said softly. Mission success confirmed. Hours later, the facility was silent again. Her team had gone home. Only Sarah remained, sitting in the half-light, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. She knew Wallace would be satisfied now. Another success, another test passed, but it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like survival. Her screen pinged, a message from Admiral Harrison. Good work today. You were right, they jammed us intentionally, but your adaptability saved the mission. Wallace has nothing left to say. Rest easy tonight. H. She smiled faintly. Then, after a long pause, she typed back. Thank you, sir, for believing before anyone else did. The reply came within seconds. That's leadership, Lieutenant. Belief before proof. She leaned back, the glow of the monitor reflecting in her tired eyes. Outside, the wind picked up again, whispering across the tarmac. In the reflection of the glass, she could see herself sitting straight-backed and strong. The woman who had once walked into this building on crutches and shame, now commanding missions that changed the course of lives. And though the ache in her leg never fully faded, it no longer felt like pain. It felt like memory, the kind that shapes steel. The sea was quiet that night, unnaturally so. Even the waves seemed to move slower, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. Sarah stood on the balcony outside the intelligence facility, her uniform jacket draped over her shoulders. The night wind carried the faint salt of the water, the scent of metal and distance. Somewhere beyond the horizon, men were returning from battle. Operation Silent Rain was over. The target was confirmed neutralized. Another victory, another report that would look clean on paper. And yet the silence was heavier than usual. She leaned on her crutch, staring into the dark, her other hand gripping the cool metal railing. There was a message waiting on her desk, encrypted, short, and impersonal. 2 KIAs in secondary unit, crossfire during exfil, 1 critical, 1 deceased. One of the names she recognized. Seaman First Class Ryan Keller, 23, a communications specialist who'd been part of the support convoy. He'd sent her an email 2 days before deployment. "Thank you for the pre-mission brief, ma'am. You make it easy to trust the intel. See you when I'm back." She swallowed hard. The words echoed in her mind like a whisper she couldn't silence. She told herself she wasn't responsible, that death in combat was inevitable, but logic couldn't erase guilt. Inside the control room, the monitors still glowed faintly. Data scrolled endlessly, indifferent to the names behind the numbers. She turned away from the ocean. The metal tap of her crutch on the concrete felt louder than before. The next morning, she didn't speak much during the debrief. Her analysts presented their findings, their voices careful, subdued. Even Park, usually bright, unflinching, looked uneasy. When the meeting ended, Admiral Harrison entered the room quietly. The team straightened automatically. "At ease," he said, his gaze sweeping over them. "Outstanding work on this mission. You all performed beyond expectation." He paused. "We lost 2 good men out there, but because of your precision, the number isn't higher." Sarah kept her head down. Harrison's eyes found her. "Lieutenant Martinez, stay behind, please." The rest filed out in silence. When the door closed, the Admiral's tone softened. "You're carrying it, aren't you?" Sarah didn't answer. She just stared at the empty chairs. "He trusted me, sir. All of them did." "And you honored that trust," he said. "But I know what you're feeling. You think if you'd seen one more angle, caught one more signal, that boy might still be alive." Her jaw tightened. "Wouldn't you?" Harrison sighed, his eyes distant. "Every day, even now." He stepped closer, the faint rhythm of his prosthetic filling the quiet. "But guilt is a soldier's shadow, Sarah. It follows us everywhere, whispering that we could have done more. The truth is, sometimes we couldn't." Sarah shook her head. "That's not good enough." He regarded her carefully. "Then make it enough, not for comfort but for purpose." She frowned. "Purpose?" He nodded. "The next mission, the next team, the next life you save because you didn't let this break you." His tone was calm, but his words cut deep. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said quietly, "Walk with me." They stepped out into the early morning light, the base humming to life around them. Trainees jogged past, helicopters roared distantly, the ocean gleamed on the horizon. Harrison stopped near the training grounds, the same place where, months ago, Sarah had stood as the SEALs mocked her. "Do you remember that day?" he asked. "I remember every second." He nodded. "So do they." He gestured toward the far end of the field where Williams' team was running drills, especially Thompson. Sarah followed his gaze. The man who'd once ridiculed her was now shouting orders, pushing his men through mud and sweat. But his tone was different, sharper, not cruel, just demanding. "He's different now," Harrison said. "I've seen it. You didn't just change your place here, Lieutenant, you changed theirs." Sarah stayed quiet. Watching them run, she felt something shift, a realization that respect wasn't a trophy you demanded. It was a weight you earned. After a while, Harrison spoke again, more softly this time. "When I lost my leg, I thought I was finished. I told myself my command was gone, my usefulness over. But the Navy taught me something then. Dignity doesn't vanish when the body breaks. It just finds new ground to stand on." He looked at her, his eyes clear. "And you found yours." She met his gaze, voice low. "Then why does it still hurt, sir?" "Because it should," he said simply. "Pain reminds us that what we do matters." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Take a day, Sarah, not to forget, to remember." Then he turned and walked away, his limp steady, rhythmic, the sound of resilience moving forward. That evening, she drove to the edge of the naval cemetery. The Pacific wind tugged at her hair as she stepped out, the rows of white headstones gleaming under a fatting sun. She found Keller's name etched into fresh stone. The air smelled like salt and cut grass. She knelt carefully, her injured leg trembling slightly. For a long time, she said nothing. Just the sound of waves below the cliff and the distant hum of a flag snapping in the wind. Finally she spoke. "You trusted me, Ryan, and I didn't bring you home. I wish I could tell you that's going to stop hurting." She paused, swallowing against the tightness in her throat. "But I'll make sure your sacrifice isn't buried with you. I'll keep doing the work, the kind that matters." The sky darkened. She reached out and rested her hand gently against the cold marble. "Rest easy, sailor. I've got it from here." As she stood, a gust of wind brushed against her face, soft, fleeting, almost like a nod. The next morning, she was back in the command center. No ceremony, no announcement, just another day, another mission waiting in the endless stream of data. Park looked up from her console. "You're early, ma'am." Sarah gave a small smile. "Couldn't sleep." Park hesitated. "You heard about Keller?" "Yes," Sarah said, "we all did." Park lowered her voice. "You know, he used to talk about you, said you were the reason he wanted to transfer here." Sarah's throat caught, but she kept her expression steady. "Then I'll make sure we keep honoring that choice." She picked up her headset, sliding it into place. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, heavy, but right. "All right, team," she said, voice steady now. "We've got new intel out of Yemen and a signal trail from Cairo that doesn't match known sources. Let's get to work." The analysts straightened immediately. Screens lit up, chatter resumed. Sarah's eyes lingered on the large monitor ahead, a digital map alive with movement, risk, and purpose. Her mind was calm, her heartbeat steady. Pain, guilt, loss, they hadn't vanished. They had simply become part of her rhythm, a cadence she would carry forward with discipline and grace. Because in this world, her world's strength wasn't measured in who never fell. It was in who stood up again, every single time, even on one leg. And as the room filled with the pulse of machinery and the quiet hum of data streams, Sarah whispered to herself, a vow more than a thought. "I'll keep walking, no matter what it costs." Outside, the flag caught the morning light, snapping proudly in the wind. The storm began before dawn. Not outside, inside. In the sterile glow of the operations center, tension crackled louder than the hum of the servers. Reports and encrypted transmissions scattered across Sarah's desk, the kind that made the stomach twist before the mind caught up. A new directive had arrived from Fleet Command, signed by Rear Admiral Kent Wallace himself. Subject: Operational Priority Reassignment, Directive 7A. Order: immediate surveillance and data transfer of classified intelligence archives to Joint Command Headquarters. Effective immediately. Note: no internal retention permitted. Sarah read the line 3 times, her pulse climbing. The archive they were ordering her to hand over wasn't just routine intelligence. It contained deep cover profiles, informant identities, encrypted field logs, names of men and women still operating inside hostile territories. If that data was mishandled, if it landed in the wrong system or the wrong hands, people would die. She could already hear Admiral Harrison's voice echoing in her mind. Belief before proof. But belief in who? Her intercom buzzed. "Ma'am, Admiral Wallace is on secure line 1, Park said, her voice uncertain. Sarah inhaled slowly, forcing calm into her tone. "Patch him through." The speaker clicked and Wallace's precise voice filled the room. "Lieutenant Martinez, I trust you've received the directive." "Yes, sir." "Then execute it immediately. All encrypted archives from Operations Neptune and Silent Rain are to be transferred to Joint Command by 1800 hours. Sarah hesitated. "Sir, With respect, those files contain live source data. Standard protocol requires in-person verification before transfer. That's been waived, Wallace replied coldly. Direct order from Fleet. This isn't open to debate. Sarah's grip on the phone tightened. Sir, if I may, we've detected anomalies in Joint Command's encryption relays. There's a 12% data integrity risk. I can't confirm that channel is secure. Then consider this your confirmation, Wallace said sharply. I'll expect your compliance, Lieutenant. Don't make this political. The line went dead. For a long moment, Sarah just sat there, staring at the blinking cursor on her terminal. Around her, her analysts worked quietly, unaware that the wrong decision today could cost lives oceans away. At 900, she found Admiral Harrison in his office. He was reviewing after-action logs, his uniform coat hanging loosely over the back of his chair. When he saw her face, he immediately set the papers aside. Talk to me. She handed him the directive. Sir, Wallace ordered me to transfer all mission data to Fleet Command servers. No verification, no oversight. Harrison's jaw tightened. And you're concerned about security. Sir, I'm concerned this order isn't about security at all. He said nothing for a long moment. Then, you think he's being pressured? I think he's covering tracks, she said quietly. There were inconsistencies in the silent rain intercepts, gaps that don't happen naturally. Someone fed false intel before the mission. We lost Keller because of it. Harrison leaned back, eyes darkening. And you think that source came from inside our own chain? Yes, sir. He rubbed his temples. You're walking a dangerous line, Sarah. Wallace has powerful allies if you defy a direct order. I'm not defying it, she said firmly. I'm verifying it. If that data leaks, it won't just be my career on the line. It'll be lives. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Then you'll do what's right, quietly. He stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. You have my authorization to run a private audit, nothing on the official logs. If Wallace questions it, it came from me. Sarah met his eyes. Thank you, sir. Just be careful, he said softly. Some wars don't happen in deserts. They happen in rooms like this. By afternoon, the intelligence wing was humming with activity. To everyone else, it was a routine system maintenance cycle. To Sarah and Park, it was an off-the-books counterintelligence operation. Redirect packet streams to the local sandbox, Sarah ordered. I want every transmission traceable. Park's fingers flew over the keyboard. Ma'am, you're cloning Fleet Command's channel if they detect this. They won't, Sarah interrupted. We'll finish before the hour's up. The minutes crawled. Lines of code raced across the screens, packets, headers, encrypted metadata. Then suddenly, Ma'am, Park whispered, there's an access anomaly in the transfer queue. Sarah leaned in. Show me. A single IP signature, unregistered, buried deep inside the Fleet encryption network. Its origin was masked through multiple proxies, but the final bounce ended in a civilian domain. One connected to a private contractor frequently used for intelligence laundering. Someone's siphoning our data, Sarah said, her voice low and dangerous. Wallace's directive wasn't about centralization, it was a cover for a leak. Park swallowed. What do we do? Sarah's eyes were cold now, her decision instant. We block it. Ma'am, that's direct insubordination. Then I'll take the hit. She tapped the keyboard, executing a hard firewall redirect. The screens blinked red as the unauthorized stream was severed. A second later, alarms blared. System breach detected. Unauthorized transmission termination. Sarah's heart pounded. Kill the alarm, lock down external comms. Park froze. Ma'am, Fleet Command just requested remote override. Override denied, Sarah snapped. Manual control only. Every second stretched longer than the last. Then, finally, silence. The monitors stabilized. The The network quieted, the breach was gone. Sarah exhaled slowly, the tension leaving her body in waves. But she knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 2 hours later, security officers arrived. She saw them coming through the glass walls, black uniforms, crisp demeanor, the unmistakable aura of internal affairs. Park turned pale. "Ma'am." Sarah nodded. "Stay calm, follow protocol." The lead investigator stepped in, expression blank. "Lieutenant Martinez, you're to come with us for questioning. Admiral Wallace has requested an immediate inquiry into an unauthorized data interception." "Of course he has," Sarah murmured under her breath. She stood slowly, grabbing her crutches. "You'll get full cooperation," she said evenly, "but I want Admiral Harrison notified." "That's above our clearance," the officer replied. Sarah smiled faintly, "Then clear it." They escorted her through the corridor, the same corridor where months ago laughter had chased her like a shadow. Now the silence that followed her was different, not mockery, respect. Her analysts watched from their desks, motionless. Park's eyes shone with restrained anger. When Sarah disappeared into the elevator, no one said a word. The interrogation room was small, sterile, the kind of place where truth felt like a liability. Wallace sat across from her, hands folded, face unreadable. "You had one order, Lieutenant: transfer the data. Instead, you ran an unauthorized audit and disrupted fleet operations." Sarah didn't flinch. "Sir, the data was being siphoned through an unregistered proxy linked to a private contractor. I stopped it." Wallace's tone sharpened. "And you have proof?" "Yes," she said. "I preserved the logs in an encrypted partition, accessible only through my authorization." His eyes narrowed. "That's quite an accusation, Lieutenant." "It's not an accusation," she replied quietly. "It's a fact." The door opened suddenly. Admiral Harrison entered, the click of his prosthetic echoing in the tension-filled room. "That'll be enough," he said. Wallace stood. "James, this is internal." "Then make it external," Harrison snapped. "Because I'm making it official. Lieutenant Martinez acted under my direct order. You want to question someone, question me." The room fell silent. Wallace's expression darkened. "You're protecting her." "I'm protecting the Navy," Harrison said coldly, "and the truth." For a moment no one moved. Then Wallace gathered his papers, every motion deliberate. "This isn't over." "Good," Harrison said, "because I'm not done either." Later that night, back in her office, Sarah sat quietly as Harrison closed the door behind him. "You realize," he said, "you just made an enemy." Sarah smiled faintly. "I already had one." He chuckled softly, the sound low and tired. "You took a hell of a risk today." "So did you," she said. "But if we hadn't, those names would be gone. Those people would be dead." He nodded, looking at her with quiet pride. "I told you once that command isn't about comfort, it's about conviction. You proved that today." She looked down at her crutches. "I didn't think I'd come this far, sir." Harrison's tone softened. "No one ever does, but sometimes the people who have been broken see the cracks first." He turned toward the door, pausing before he left. "Get some rest, Lieutenant. You've just changed the story they'll tell about you." When he was gone, Sarah sat alone in the glow of the monitors, the soft hum of machines filling the silence. Outside, the storm that had threatened all morning had finally broken, rain lashing against the glass, thunder rolling across the sea. She closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. In a world that measured worth by the unbroken, she had built her strength from fractures. And somewhere in the thunder, she thought she heard a voice, maybe Harrison's, maybe her own, whispering what she had always known but never said aloud. Sometimes courage isn't standing tall, it's refusing to kneel. The ocean was calm again, deceptively calm, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm but before the truth settles in. 3 days had passed since the inquiry. 3 long sleepless days. Sarah hadn't been charged, but neither had she been cleared. The investigation was under review, a phrase that sounded bureaucratic but felt like a noose waiting to tighten. Her badge still worked. Her clearance still stood. But every step through the corridors now came with stares, not of judgment but of uncertainty. Some saw her as a hero, who'd stopped a betrayal inside the chain of command. Others saw her as a liability, a soldier who challenged authority too directly. She didn't care which story they believed. She just wanted the truth to mean something. That morning, the base was silent, except for the low hum of engines and distant gulls. Sarah was in her office when the message came through. It was marked confidential, ADM Harrison only. But her name was in the CC line. Her pulse kicked as she opened it. From Kent Wallace at Fleet Mill. To Harrison James at Navspicom Mill. Martinez Sarah at Navspicom Mill. Subject Joint Command Findings. Inquiry closed. No misconduct found. Lieutenant Martinez acted within operational authority under temporary authorization by Admiral Harrison. Data breach confirmed external to fleet infrastructure. Investigation transferred to Defense Cyber Command. Effective immediately. Lieutenant Martinez is reinstated as Lead Strategic Operations Officer. She read it twice before her breath finally left her. It was over. She'd been vindicated. And yet the victory felt hollow. Because truth, she had learned, didn't always come with celebration. Sometimes it just arrived quietly, carrying relief instead of joy. An hour later, Harrison appeared at her door. He didn't smile, he just nodded once. You saw it. Yes, sir. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Fleet Command folded faster than I expected. I think Wallace realized the deeper they dug, the more questions they'd have to answer. Sarah looked down at her hands. He'll come after me again, won't he? Harrison's eyes softened. He'll try, but now he knows you don't scare easily. She managed a faint smile. I wasn't trying to be fearless, sir. I was just tired of being quiet. That earned her a small laugh, the kind that sounded like it hadn't escaped him in a while. You remind me of someone I used to know, he said. Someone who wouldn't back down even when the system told him to. Yourself, she asked gently. He chuckled again. Maybe, but I like to think you're what I was supposed to become. The silence between them was warm this time, not military, human. He turned to leave but paused at the doorway. I'm retiring next month, he said. Medical board's been after me for years. Guess they finally won. The news hit harder than she expected. Sir, I didn't. He held up a hand. Don't. I'm not leaving because of this. I'm leaving because I can, because people like you are here now. Her throat tightened. You taught me everything I know. His gaze lingered on her, steady and proud. No, I just reminded you of what you already were. Then with that familiar rhythm, step, click, step, he walked out for the last time. That evening, she found herself alone again in the operations room. The lights were dimmed, the hum of the servers steady like a heartbeat. Screens glowed with quiet life, maps, code streams, encrypted feeds, the constant pulse of the hidden wars that never made headlines. She touched the edge of one monitor, remembering all the moments that had unfolded here. The fear, the doubt, the quiet victories that no one outside these walls would ever know. Park entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee. You still here, ma'am? Sarah smiled faintly. Bad habit. Park placed a mug on her desk. Admiral Harrison stopped by before leaving, told me to tell you he's proud. Sarah looked down at the cup, steam curling in the blue light. He's the reason I stayed standing. Park nodded softly. You know, people talk about you differently now. Oh. They used to whisper about your crutches, Park said. Now they whisper about your strength. Sarah didn't respond right away. The words sank deep, somewhere between pride and sorrow. Strength isn't what they think it is, she said quietly. It's not the medals or the headlines. It's showing up again, even when no one believes in you, even when you barely believe in yourself. Park smiled gently. Still, you changed something here. Sarah looked up at the wall where the mission plaques hung, the silent record of operations, each one a story, a cost, a memory. No, she said finally, we did. Days turned into weeks. The investigation faded from conversation. The world moved on as it always did. Sarah returned to the rhythm of missions, the 3 a.m. briefings, the coded transmissions, the endless decisions made in the space between instinct and faith. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, she'd walk out to the balcony overlooking the sea, the same place she had stood on the night of the storm. The crutches still came with her, not because she needed them all the time now, but because they reminded her of where she began, the pain, the laughter, the silence that once filled the room. The first time she'd heard those laughs, she had looked down, ashamed. Now she looked back, unbroken. A week before Harrison's official retirement, a ceremony was held on base. Every officer was in attendance. The hangar was lined with banners and medals, the air thick with pride and nostalgia. Harrison stood at the podium, his prosthetic leg gleaming faintly in the light. When his speech ended, he did something unexpected. He called Sarah to the stage. The murmurs spread instantly. She hadn't been told this would happen. As she approached, her crutches clicked softly against the floor. When she reached him, he didn't say a word. He just turned to the crowd. You all know what strength looks like, he began. But what you see here, this woman, is what resilience sounds like. The room went silent. Even the air seemed to pause. She came here on crutches, Harrison continued. They laughed. She stayed silent. She took it day after day until one day the silence turned into something stronger than pride. He turned to her then, voice low but sure. Lieutenant Martinez, on behalf of Naval Special Warfare Command, I present you the Meritorious Service Commendation for courage, integrity, and leadership beyond the call of duty. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was slow, deliberate, powerful. Sarah didn't cry. She didn't even smile at first. She just stood there, the medal heavy against her uniform, feeling the weight of every moment that had led her here, the pain, the humiliation, the storm, the choices. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but unwavering. I used to think strength meant never breaking, she said. But I've learned something different. Sometimes strength is what happens after the break. It's what you build when no one's watching. She looked out at the crowd, at the SEALs, the analysts, even Wallace standing stiff at the edge of the formation. Dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't fight to be seen. It just acts quietly and completely. Then she turned to Harrison. Thank you, sir, for teaching me how to stand. He smiled, not as an admiral, but as a man who understood exactly what those words meant. That night the base was quiet again. Sarah stood by the pier, the medal still tucked in her pocket. The sky was a canvas of stars, the waves dark and endless. She leaned against the railing, breathing in the sea air, the sound of gulls faint in the distance. This was where it all began, where she first decided that her injury wouldn't define her, where she learned that sometimes silence is a weapon sharper than any blade. She thought of Keller, of Thompson, of every name on those after-action logs, and then of Harrison, the man who had seen her not as broken but as becoming. The tide whispered below her, soft and eternal. In that moment, she didn't feel like a survivor. She felt like a soldier again, one who had finally made peace with her scars. She smiled faintly and whispered into the night. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The wind carried her words away, over the water into the horizon. Where strength was quiet, pain was purpose. And silence was victory.